Well, the rocks have been tumbling for a little over a week now. It's time to open them up and see what we've got. So I'm going to turn off the tumbler. I'm going to find the switch here. There we go. That's a whole lot quieter. And we've got 4 barrels. Again, this is the one where I showed you the rocks. So we're going to check this one out and see what has happened over the last week. Now you remember a few videos back I said that whenever I finish a stage, I am going to burnish or rinse the rocks. And I do that between all 4 stages. And the time that I do it is usually a few hours, but it really depends on the time of the day, how long they stay in. Right now, it's about noon my time, so I will take these and I'm going to put them in burnish, and probably after supper I'll take them out. If I were to put them in burnish in the evening, then I'd leave them overnight. Really doesn't matter how long, but you want at least a few hours to get the excess grit off. Now there's one other thing that I'm going to mention before I open this up, and that is at one point in the tumbling, this is on my older tumbler, and occasionally it has issues and just stops. And I came in on 2 different occasions and found it stopped. That can cause a problem with the grit. And the problem it will cause, if it happened, is the grit will be just all gloppy and it won't have done its job. So it's entirely possible that this barrel and the other barrel on that older tumbler might have to go through stage 1 again. But I'm hoping not. So let's see what we've got. And now normally if I find a tumbler has stopped and the barrels have not been rotating, then I have a pan, and I will open them up and I'll dig all of the rocks out and stir up the grit again, add a little bit new grit just to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. But I wanted to let this go just to show you if there was a bad effect, let you see what it looks like. So this is kind of a learning process, and I wanted you to see what can go wrong as well as what can go right. So we take the lid off, and boy, what a mess. That's our slurry, and that's actually a good look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse off this lid. I want to get all the grit and all the slurry off of it. Sometimes a little air gets underneath it, so I sort of have to burp it. Okay, look at that sludge. It's wonderful. Let's dump it in. Whoa. Okay, now, as we look at the bottom there is some grit in the bottom, but it's not too bad. So I think we're going to be okay here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in and rinse and get all this excess grit out. I want to rinse the outside of the barrel a little bit too. Because I don't want to keep any more grit in there than is absolutely necessary. I really want this as clean as possible. Still a little bit. It's looking pretty good though, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to stir these up a little bit. Now you'll notice that what has happened during the week, and we'll look at this more after I take them through the burnish and get ready for the next stage, the edges have kind of rounded off a little bit. Okay, that's good. I'm going to put these over in my little tray here for a second. remember this. Do not dump that down your drain. There are no chemicals in this, nothing that's going to cause a problem. So, you can pour it in the grass outside, pour it just about anywhere. All it is again, silicone carbide and water and whatever little minerals that have come off the rock. But if you pour it down your drain, then it will, over time, the grit will settle down in there. It will begin to dissolve, harden, and sooner or later your drain will stop up. So be sure not to ever dump grit down your drain. Okay, so now that I have done this, taken them out, they are ready to go into the burnishing process, which is just going to be a nice rinse. So I'm going to put them back in the tumbler. Okay, now you'll see that this has lost a lot of volume. Remember, this was right at the top. Now there's a fair amount of gap, and that's what's supposed to happen. That's the idea. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my borax in. Remember, for the burnishing, I use basically 3 tablespoons. So I've got 1/8 of a cup here. And then I'm going to add another, hit that with my head. About another teaspoon, so that's about 3 teaspoons. And then I'm going to cover the stones with water. Now, again, if I'm tumbling with grit, then I'm only going to bring the water up to about the bottom of the top layer of rocks. But because this is a rinse stage, I want to get them covered good. Shake it up there a little bit to get the borax moving around. And then I'm going to put the lid back on. And this is going to go for about 5 or 6 hours. And then we'll look at it again and rinse it off, and then we'll decide what we're going to do, whether it's going to go another week in stage 1, or if we're going to move it straight on to stage 2. So I'm going to put this back on the tumbler, turn the tumbler on, and then we'll check it out in about 6 hours. All right, we have burnished for several hours, so let's see what our rocks look like now. Okay, now this is going to look a lot different than when I had the grit in there, because this time it's just borax water. And so we're going to just go ahead and put it in here again. Okay, you can see some of the residue, that white residue in the bottom there is excess grit that has come off and mixed with the borax water. So that's why it is important to always burnish between stages. The other thing that burnishing does is it really gives the barrel a good cleaning and gets the, any little bit of grit that's on the sides or whatever, because you don't want to carry grit from stage 1 into stage 2 or stage 2 into stage 3. You want to keep that pretty much separate and clean. So let me give these another good rinse. And then it's decision time. My decision is simply, do I want to let these go another week in stage 1. Remember, you can stay in stage 1 as long as you want to. There's no hard and fast rule for any of these. And basically, it depends on how rounded you want the stones to be. Personally, I like a more natural look. So typically, I don't keep mine in stage 1 more than about 10 days, and that's how long these have been in. I really prefer to still have the rock look as opposed to a completely rounded stone. So I'm quite happy with these. So that's going to make my decision pretty easy, and that's to move these into the next stage. Now, sometimes it is good if you find a rock that is particularly pitted, like this one here. You can see all these pits right on the end. Those can hold grit, and often if it's looking like this, it's probably not going to take a really good polish. But a lot of times what I will do is wait and see what it does in the second stage before I decide whether or not to take it out. If I don't think it's ready to move on, then with any of these stones, if I look through them and decide that they're not ready to move on, then I just take them out. And then when I start a new batch, here's another one that could be taken out. Look at all those pits there. Okay, those are just going to hold grit. They're, it might take a polish, might not. But the stones like this, for the most part, if you take those out, then when you start a new batch, just put those back in, and you can maybe get that down a little bit more. Normally, though, as many pits are in this one, not so much this one. It would take quite a few runs through stage 1 to fix those. And so I'm going to just go ahead and leave them in. Again, it's a personal choice, but I still can get a polish off of these areas. You just have to be more careful that you don't let the grit move from stage to stage, so you always want to make sure that you have burnished really well. And but I'm happy with what we've got, so I'll move these all back in. But this time I have to do something else. There's one more step, and that's because, as I showed you last time, the stones have lost, lost a stone there too. Stones have lost some mass because of their time in the tumbler. A certain portion of them has been dissolved. Just a side thought, as you look there, see all of that in the bottom. Now some of that is borax powder, or borax, but a lot of that is just grit that's come off of the stones. So, okay, so we've lost a lot of volume. You look there, that used to be right at the surface. So what do? Well, to fill that up, because if you don't, whoops, sorry, I just bumped the camera again. If you don't fill up that space, then the stones are going to hit against each other too much. So what you use I use anyway, ceramic media. These are just little pieces of ceramic, different sizes, that go right in there. I'm going to shake that around a little bit and see where my volume is now. Okay, I'm almost there. I'm going to put just a little bit more in. And what these are going to do, they're going to help carry the grit. Okay, there we go. We're about even. They're going to help carry the grit, and they're also going to cushion the stones so that they don't rub against each other too much, because we really don't want that. Get that screw back down inside there so I can put the lid on. And once I have that, I'm going to shake it up a little bit. There we go, to get them distributed a little bit more, and then I'm going to come back to filling with water. Okay. And then again, bring that water level up just below that top batch of rocks there. Shake it again a little bit. Okay, now again, I'm going to put some borax in. This time for the polishing process. Again, I just use about a tablespoon, so I've got 1/8 of a cup here, and I get about half of that in there, and that goes in. Now again, usually with borax, I like to put that in before I put the water in, and then spray the water on it to dissolve it better, because it gets kind of chunky when you do it that way. But the tumbling motion will solve most of that. And then I have my step 2 grit. This is also silicon carbide. It's 220 degrees, not 220 degrees, 220 gauge. So I've got a great big 1/4 cup of that, and I'm going to put a 1/4 cup in. And it's going to go just like that, right on top. And then I put my top back on. Put the lid on the tumbler. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a shake. And that's going to go back on the tumbler for another week to 10 days. So we'll put it on there, and in a week to 10 days, we'll come back and see what we have. Thanks for watching. I'm Jim Pence with See the Light, and we'll keep tumbling these, and it's going to be really amazing, particularly as we get closer to the end.